Good evening. Welcome to our Good Friday service. Our aim in this service is to give us something to reflect upon over the next couple of days until we meet again here to celebrate Easter. I've taken verses from all four of the Gospels. You will find them interspersed throughout the readings. And if you didn't get one of these, which kind of gives us a synopsis of each of the readings, I'm going to have some and pass them out. The one thing that I do have on here is throughout different parts, we're going to take a break and go through one of the verses of hymn number 288, Were You There? And so you might want to, if you grab a hymnal and just kind of bookmark that page so you can use that. It's number 288. It's Were You There? As I said, I'm taking verses from all four of the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And as we begin tonight, or where this service begins, would be at the end of the Last Supper. In Matthew, it starts in chapter 26. In Mark, that begins in chapter 14. In Luke, it's chapter 22. And in John, we begin in chapter 18. And when you get one of these and you see where the verses start, because it's written on the backside, I would encourage you over the next couple of days to read through those stories and see a little bit more in depth of all that Jesus went through his final day. At the end of the final reading, I'm going to go and I'm going to play a song called the Passion Song. And then after I play that song, then we'll come and we'll extinguish the last candle. And you're welcome to stay here as long as you want in an attitude of prayer. You can come up to the altar if you want and kneel and pray there. If you need some help getting back up, I'm going to hang around for a while. I might need help getting back up too, so if we kneel too long. And you're, again, welcome to stay as long as you wish and then leave in silence. And so we begin.
After the traditional Passover meal, Jesus and the 11 disciples who were with him went outside and traveled down into the Kidron Valley to a place called Gethsemane. In this olive orchard, a place where Jesus went regularly, his disciples found a place to sit, while Jesus, taking Peter, James, and John, went deeper into the grove. In this place, Jesus told them his soul was crushed to the point of death. "Stay here and keep watch with me." Jesus, going a little further, fell to the ground. His anguish was great. Even so, you know how it is after having a big meal. You sit down and relax a bit, and it becomes hard to stay awake. That is the story of the disciples. They began to relax, and sleep came to their eyes. Can you blame them? There had been so much talk about Jesus dying and rising again. This is not what they thought the Messiah was supposed to be about. Sometimes I see Peter in me. I can imagine he, James, and John talking about what all this meant and ready for a good night's sleep. I might even be thinking something like, maybe this will all make sense in the morning.
Gospel of Luke tells us that as Jesus prayed in the garden, he was sweating drops of blood. For many years, this seemed like a mystery. How could a man sweat drops of blood? In the concentration camps of Germany during World War II, it was witnessed that a person could have such a great anxiety, the capillaries could actually leak blood through the pores in the skin. As mentioned before, Jesus was in great anguish. It may seem amazing that Jesus, the Son of God, could have been in this kind of anguish. Did Jesus see exactly how the future would unfold? Was he able to see the torture he was about to bear? Did Jesus look through the linear timeline of humanity and see that things do not get much better? Did Jesus see the pain that we would cause others? As God in the flesh, Jesus knew when he left the kingdom of heaven to live among us that the limitations of humanity, there was a specific work to do. He would bring a new understanding of the power of love, specifically God's love to humanity. Through Jesus, we would know that the kingdom of God is something that is alive here and now. I am certain that Jesus knew he would be the sacrifice to reunite people with God. But being fully God and fully human, this part shows the fullness of Jesus' humanity as he prays, Father, everything is possible for you. Please take this cup of suffering away from me. Yet not my will, but your will be done.
Jesus returns to find the disciples snoozing. Peter, could you not watch with me for 1 hour? Keep watch and pray so that you will not give in to temptation. For the spirit is willing, but the body is weak. Jesus went back, and as he was praying, an angel came and strengthened him. 2 more times he came back to find the disciples sleeping. The 3rd time, Judas arrived with a crowd of men armed with swords and clubs. He steps up to the master and gives him a kiss on the cheek. Mark tells us Jesus asked them, "Am I some dangerous revolutionary that you come to me with swords and clubs to arrest me? Why didn't you arrest me in the temple? I was there among you, teaching you every day." All 4 mentioned someone slashing off an ear of Malchus, the high priest's slave. John tells us it was Peter. As they arrested Jesus, the disciples ran their separate ways, running for their lives.
Jesus was tied up and taken to Annas, the father-in-law of Caiaphas, the high priest at that time. It was Caiaphas who had told the Jewish leaders, "It is better that one should die for the people." During the mock trial there was taking place in the courtyard of the high priest, Peter had followed but wasn't able to get in. A woman asks Peter if he was one of Jesus' disciples. Peter replied, "No, I am not," the first of 3 prophesied denials of Jesus by Peter that evening. Earlier at the meal, when Jesus was telling them once again that he would die and that the disciples would fall away, Peter had said, "Not me, I am true to you, Jesus." And Jesus told Peter that he would deny him 3 times before the rooster crows. Maybe that is one reason Peter was so emotionally drained that evening and couldn't stay awake. Have you ever been told, despite your best intentions, there is no way you are going to follow through on something? How do you imagine Peter felt, knowing he would deny Jesus not once, but 3 times?
As they moved Jesus to the high priest's home, where the Sanhedrin had begun gathering, Peter follows at a distance. There were many people brought in to testify against Jesus, but they could not get their stories straight. One would contradict one of the others. The closest charge that might have had something to do with anything was a testimony that Jesus had talked about destroying the temple and rebuilding it in 3 days. But even those telling this story could not get it straight. Caiaphas wanted to move things along. Caiaphas, wanting to move things along, asked Jesus to defend himself. Is it any wonder that Jesus did not try to defend himself? If they cannot bring up something worthy, why do they think Jesus would make some remark? They have been trying unsuccessfully to trap Jesus all week, but have failed. Meanwhile, outside the gates, Peter is recognized by a servant girl who says, "You were one of those with Jesus of Nazareth." Peter shot back, "I don't know what you're talking about. I don't even know the man."
the failure begins. Caiaphas wasn't about to back down. False testimonies are getting this trial nowhere. So he continues to press the silent Jesus into saying something. Finally, he cuts to the chase. I demand in the name of the living God, tell us if you are the Messiah, the Son of God. Jesus replies, you have said it, and in the future you will see the Son of Man seated in the place of power at God's right hand. The right priest tore his clothing to show his horror, shouting, blasphemy! Why do you need other witnesses? You have all you heard his blasphemy. What is your verdict? Guilty, they shouted. He deserves to die. And they began to spit in his face and beat him with their fists. Some slapped him, jeering, prophecy to us, you Messiah, who hit you that time? Who hit you that time?
A little while later, out by the gate where Peter was warming himself by the fire, one of the bystanders came over to Peter and said, you must be one of them. Your Galilean accent gives you away. And Peter swore, a curse on me if I am lying. I don't know the man. Immediately, the rooster crowed. Jesus' words flashed through his mind. Before the rooster crows, you will deny 3 times that you even know me. Peter went away and wept bitterly. Judas, who had betrayed Jesus, realized that Jesus had been condemned to die and was also filled with remorse. He tried to get the priests and the elders to take back the money, but they refused. Judas threw the money down, left the place, and went out and hung himself. The priest, not wanting the blood money to be run through the temple treasury, eventually bought the potter's field, making it a cemetery. In some way or another, we will all deny Jesus. How do you respond when you have denied Jesus?
Jesus is taken next to Pilate. The conversation begins with Pilate asking the question, are you the king of the Jews? Can you picture this scene? Pilate sitting in a chair surrounded by guards and servants. The chief priest standing there with a tied-up man making accusations against him. They charge Jesus with teaching people not to pay the Roman taxes and making the claim that he is the king. Herod, the ruler of that region, when Jesus was born, the one who had the temple rebuilt, was threatened by the birth of Jesus, so much so that he sent troops to kill all the boys under 2 years old in Bethlehem. Pilate, though, can find nothing wrong with this man, so the priests press the issue. He has been causing riots by teaching all over Judea, from Galilee to Jerusalem, they insist. Pilate sees an opportunity to make Jesus someone else's problem. He is a Galilean, so Jesus is marched off to see Herod Antipas. It was a short trip, as Herod happened to be in Jerusalem.
Herod was excited. No doubt he had heard of Jesus. The miracles he'd performed made him the talk of the countryside. Maybe I can get him to perform a miracle. That would be lovely, wouldn't it? When Jesus arrived, Herod began asking questions after question to no avail. Jesus waited patiently without saying a word. The priests were standing around shouting their accusations. When Herod could not get Jesus to respond, he began mocking him. His soldiers put a royal robe on him, and they sent him back to Pilate. If Jesus was standing in front of you, would you ask for a miracle?
Back at Pilate's headquarters, Pilate tells the accusers to take him and judge him by their own laws. The leaders replied, "Only the Romans are permitted to execute someone." Pilate has Jesus brought up to him. "Are you the king of the Jews?" Pilate asked. In John's account of Jesus' life, Jesus replies, "Is this your question, or did others tell you about me?" "Am I a Jew?" Pilate retorted. "Your own people and their leading priests brought you to me for trial. Why? What have you done?" Jesus answered, "My kingdom is not an earthly kingdom. If it were, my followers would fight to keep me from being handed over to the Jewish leaders, but my kingdom is not of this world." Pilate said, "So you are a king?" Jesus responded, "You say I am a king. Actually, I was born and came into the world to testify to the truth. All who love the truth recognize that what I say is truth." "What is truth?" Pilate asked. It is amazing that this question is one that is not answered, at least in John's gospel. Yet at the same time, I believe it is answered. We live in a time when truth seems to be a moving target. Jesus said he is the way, truth, and the life. Do you believe that?
Pilate, still wanting nothing to do with this whole scenario, goes out to the people and tells them, "He is not guilty of any crime, but you have a custom of asking me to release one prisoner each year at Passover. Would you like me to release this king of the Jews?" "No," they shouted back, "we want Barabbas." "Then what should I do with this man you call the king of the Jews?" "Crucify him," they shouted. Each time Pilate asked why, the crowd shouted all the louder, "Crucify, crucify, crucify him." So Pilate released Barabbas to the crowd and sent Jesus away to be whipped and crucified.
After being whipped, beaten, and mocked by the soldiers, they put a purple robe on him. They wove thorn branches into a crown and put it on his head. Then they gave him a cross to carry out to Golgotha, the place of the skull. Along the way, Simon of Cyrene was seized and forced to help Jesus carry the cross. There was a large crowd of grief-stricken women that followed along. Jesus turned to them and said, "Daughters of Jerusalem, don't weep for me, but weep for yourselves and for your children." It was 9 o'clock in the morning when they nailed him to the cross. A sign announced the charge against him. It read, "The King of the Jews." Meanwhile, the leaders who had followed them out mocked him some more, saying, "He saved others, let him save himself. You said you were going to destroy the temple and rebuild it in 3 days. Well then, if you are the Son of God, save yourself and come down from the cross." The soldiers gathered around and cast lots for his possessions. Jesus. 2 criminals were crucified with him, one on his right and one on his left. One of the criminals scoffed, "So you're the Messiah, are you? Prove it by saving yourself and us too, while you're at it." But the other criminal protested, "Don't you fear God even when you have been sentenced to die? We deserve to die for our crimes, but this man hasn't done anything wrong." Then he said, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." And Jesus replied, "I assure you, today you will be with me in paradise."
Jesus, while on the cross, makes a number of statements. The first one, as they are nailing him to it, he says, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." And as was just read to the criminal, "I assure you, today you will be with me in paradise." Looking at his mother and the beloved disciple who were there, he says to his mother, "Dear woman, here is your son." And to the disciple, "Here is your mother." At noon, darkness fell across the whole land. The sun refused to shine. Around 3 o'clock, Jesus called out with a loud voice, "Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani," which means, my God, why have you forsaken me?" He said, "I am thirsty." He said, "Father, I entrust my spirit into your hands." And finally, he said, "It is finished." All of these statements have significant meaning. As we consider the life of Christ, most of these statements are not surprising. But to many, there is one that is troubling. Did God abandon Jesus? Jesus, reading from Psalm 22, where my God, where have you forsaken me comes from. Maybe you felt that God has abandoned you at times. Many of people throughout history have struggled over this scripture, this passage. But this passage is a passage that reveals in Jesus that Jesus was both fully human and fully God. We may all go through a time when we may not feel God's presence. Jesus can identify with us, as he knows what it feels like when God's presence is not sensed, even in the midst of crucifixion. Remember, God will never abandon you.
It is finished. The work of salvation was complete. Jesus died on the cross. A Roman officer who stood facing him saw how he died. He exclaimed, "This man truly was the Son of God." A soldier had come to break the legs of those who were crucified to hasten their death. When he came to Jesus, he saw that he was already dead, so he did not break Jesus' legs. Another who was with him speared him in the side to fulfill Scripture. Then Joseph of Arimathea took a risk and asked for the body of Jesus. Pilate granted permission when he found out that Jesus was already dead. Joseph brought a long sheet of linen cloth, took Jesus' body down, and laid it in a tomb carved out of a rock that had never been used. They laid Jesus' body in that tomb and rolled a stone in front of the entrance. The woman who had watched all this take place went home to prepare the spices and ointments to anoint the body. By the time they had gathered them together, the Sabbath had begun, so they had to wait.
I was with him when he rode into town. The crowds gathered round him like a king. Their smiling faces joined a sea of branches waving, though they were masquerading in the end. My heart rose in my throat when I heard them him sing, Hosanna. In the highest. Oh, oh. We went upstairs, broke the bread and drank the wine from the only living vine that we would taste. And I watched them take him up the mountainside where he was crucified, though innocent. And they mocked him and cursed him with their mouths and told him to come down if he was God. And my heart broke in my chest when I heard him say, forgive them, it is finished. Oh, I remember in the garden when he sweat like drops of blood, and how he begged the Father just to let him pass the cup. I can still feel the anguish when they pierced him in the side, and how the ground beneath us shook upon the very moment that he died. Oh, oh, oh. 3 days later, we found an empty grave. The stone was rolled away where he had been. Tears of joy streamed down my face when the angel said, oh, fear not, he is risen. Oh, fear not.